Nice. We will go ahead and get started today as you're taking your seats. I welcome everybody, obviously, watching Advisory as well. Today, we have another senior speech. We'll welcome Marshall Miller.
Good morning. I was sitting at the wooden table in the green striped chair while twirling my fork around my plate. My legs kept crossing and uncrossing without my knowledge. At the time, all I could think about were my lines and what I would do if I forgot them. I kept running them over in my head, but the more I did this, the more I seemed to become nervous. I had my first ever acting performance the next day. Even though I was a young little fourth grader, I had expectations for myself to do well. My loving grandmother to my right noticed my nerves, and she grabbed my hand from under the table and gave it a squeeze. She knew I was nervous because I was quiet at the dinner table, while normally I would be mentioning something exciting. I chewed my piece of chicken, silently contemplating, when my uncle asked me if I was ready. I said something along the lines of, "I know what I'm supposed to say, but I'm scared I might forget something." My family reassured me that I would be okay. After dinner was over, my grandmother pulled me aside to talk to me. I looked out at the darkening sky to the rectangular window on my right and saw a few lightning bugs twinkling in the moonlight. They were dancing as if they didn't have a care in the world. She asked me, "Marshall, did you know I directed A Christmas Carol when I taught school?" My grandmother's eyes lit up whenever she started talking about her young students. She told me their faces illuminated with excitement whenever she mentioned something regarding the play. Their smiles were so big you could see them from far away in the audience. She told me that I would always try to make it fun for the students, even though I was pushing them to do their best. I gave them advice on how to keep pushing forward, even if they messed up a line and forgot what to say. She then told me about a specific day when she was in town. It was a hot summer day in downtown Boaz, Alabama, when she ran into one of her past students. Her student immediately recognized her and started a conversation. She told me about how her students still thought about A Christmas Carol because of how amazing my grandmother had made the experience. The corners of her eyes crinkled as she smiled, telling me, I made them understand how important it was to create their own view of how they thought the characters in the play were thinking. As I've gotten older, I've grown to realize her lessons were about life. My grandmother had left a creative outlet for her students to enjoy their performance and to learn from their experiences in a meaningful way. She gave them advice not only for the play, but for everything else they would encounter later in life. She told me that it's okay if you forget a line, just push forward with what you know. I looked into my grandmother's eyes as her words sank in, knowing I would do my best for the play the next day. It wasn't until I was a little older when I realized she wasn't only talking about the play, she was talking about life. I felt the slightly rough and textured carpet beneath my feet as I bounded excitedly up the stairs on all fours. Crawling up the stairs this way was becoming a habit for 8-year-old Marshall. Rug burns were a common occurrence. I crawled up the remaining stairs quickly, seeing the soft afternoon light coming in through the bathroom window. I scrambled to my feet, and to my left, heard the television from the room my grandmother was in. My footsteps were silent as I imagined her laying down with a calm expression on her face, watching the peaceful waters of Guntersville. I jumped on the bed and went to lay down next to her as she greeted me with a warm smile. "Did you enjoy your lunch?" she asked me. I replied with a nod and a smile. I turned my eyes to the left and noticed the Hallmark Channel playing at a low volume. My grandmother's favorite channel was the Hallmark Channel, with good reason. Her favorite type of movies were fun, lively romance movies that always had a happy ending. I cuddled up next to my grandmother as we started watching your typical romantic comedy. After about 30 minutes into the movie, 8-year-old Marshall had begun to look for other things to do. I crawled over the large blankets and stepped onto the carpeted floor, looking around the room. My grandmother watched me curiously, seeing what I would do next. Then she finally asked the question, "Do you want to hear a Green Man story?" I excitedly jumped back onto the bed, ready to hear another story of the Green Man. Ever since my brother and I were young, we came up with scenarios about the Green Man. These stories would vary from being simple to being very complicated with twists and turns. The Green Man was the jolly green giant that was on food products, but we just called him the Green Man. My grandmother pulled me in close and said to me, "Once upon a time, there was a green man who lived in a green house who owned a green car. One sunny day, where the sky was bright and green, the green man had opened his garage door and was cleaning his car, examining his engine, when suddenly he heard a frustrated yell from across the street. The green man immediately ran across the street to help his neighbor. He held a hand up to his eyes to shield the sun as he realized his neighbor was having issues with his car as well. The green man said to his neighbor, "Well, now that..." I looked up at my grandmother when she was mid-sentence, confused as to why she stopped the story. I asked her why the green man was immediately wanting to help his neighbor, and she smiled down at me with a knowing look. This time, she encouraged me to finish the story on my own the way I wanted it to end. She encouraged me to use my imagination and figure out why the green man was who he was. She gave me advice on how to keep telling the story and keep pushing forward, even if you aren't sure how it is going to end. Sometimes the endings are not always happy ones. I quickly slipped on the small boots and started down the carpeted stairs, feeling slightly numb. I kept thinking to myself in my head, "She would want you to be happy right now." I repeated that to myself when I pulled the car door open and swung one leg in the car. I repeated that to myself when I got out of the car. I believe I repeated that mantra to myself many times that day. It was January 2019, and I was at my grandmother's funeral. I was looking for the restroom when I saw her lying in the casket. I never wanted to see her that way. I steadied myself with a hand on the wall and took a deep breath. When the service was over, tears were shed, I shook many hands and hugged many people. After the service, I was sitting on a couch with my brother when a man came up to us and introduced himself. My mom introduced us, and he told a lighthearted joke that we were her carbon copies. I laughed because Mama would have wanted me to laugh. There were other snippets of conversation I heard, moments where someone would mention my grandmother with a happy tone to their voices. I remember so many different faces and names, all having known my grandmother at some point in their lives. One of Mama's best friends said that she was one of a kind. Others said she had a fierce kindness about her. Others said she was naturally funny and always made them laugh. More talked about the way she was passionate about teaching. From the time at the beginning of the reception to the time at the end of the reception, I had an even better understanding of who my grandmother was to others. She was the kind of person to show you kindness no matter who you were, but she was also the kind of person to push you in the right direction. Part of her nature to do so was rooted in her being a teacher. She was the one to push you to finish your own story, even if you don't know the answer or the ending. She was the one to encourage your imagination and make your story how you want it to end. That is one thing I love the most about my grandmother. Even though she is not here anymore, the lessons she taught me will stay with me forever. Whatever I do in life, she wanted me to do my best, work hard, and keep moving forward, no matter the situation. It was like with the 4th grade play. If you forget your lines, just keep going. It's the same with life. I encourage you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. Obviously, we're sitting here 1 week prior to fall break, and I know we're all excited about it. We have a few things just to announce as we're getting ready for that. Start Athletics had a great weekend. Football moved on to really a school historical best at 6-0 on the weekend with their big win on Friday night. And our cross-country teams, both boys and girls, won the Kudzu Invitational this weekend. Let's give them a round of applause. Volleyball has a big week ahead as well. Westminster will be here tomorrow. It really has been fun to see everyone coming out and supporting each other in that as we've talked about. Also homecoming, when we get back from fall break, it'll be a busy week and a fun week with homecoming activities planned for that following week. The dress-up days, they're intended to be fun, but also be appropriate, right? And the more appropriate we can be, the more fun we can have as we go forward with that. Watch the morning report. It has the information for what those dress-up days will be. And with that, if you are bringing a guest who does not attend Randolph to our dance, which will be outside on the Commons lawn on Saturday, those forms are in the office and they can be picked up there in the office. Also, this Thursday, one of the things that we want to do as we've started this year and as we return to much more of a normal school environment is to really assess how things are working in terms of homework and the load there. Homework is something that your teachers are very intentional about being meaningful assignments to help you in your learning. One thing we want to make sure, though, is that we also have that same appropriate level that we have written in our guidelines in our handbook. And so one of the things we want to do is assess really how does that match up with your experience in doing that. So Thursday in advisory, you will take a survey in which you'll see you'll see the guidelines that we have that you all know from reading the handbook, and just answer for every class, how does this align with the load that I have in my class? So that will take place on Thursday. Also, there's a space for any additional feedback that you have. Your teachers want to know this because, again, they want to help you in taking ownership in your learning there. So please be mindful of that. Also, Thursday, we will have a fire drill in the morning. Your teachers will be going over what those plans are as we get closer. You'll see some information again in other forms, but the general flow of fire drills, we all exit the building using the nearest stairwell to go downstairs and out. We meet in the lawn of the Commons lawn there, and you meet up with your advisor who takes attendance, gets that to us. So everybody report when a fire alarm is pulled, meet in the Commons lawn, meet with your advisor. They'll take attendance and then report that. We'll give the all clear and we'll go back to class. That'll be Thursday morning. When we're done here in just a second, I need the freshmen to stay after for just a little bit. And with that, seniors, you're dismissed.